So now we need to find the length of this other section. So using the Pythagorean theorem again, a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. And again, a and b represent the legs. Those are the sides that make up the 90-degree angle. So my legs for this right triangle are 5 and 6. So 5 squared plus 6 squared is equal to, and again, we don't know the hypotenuse. That's what we're looking for. So when we simplify, 5 squared is 25. 6 squared is 36, and that's going to be equal to c squared. And when I add 25 and 36, I will get 61. But remember, I'm looking for c, the length of the hypotenuse. So the opposite of something being squared is to take the square root. So if I take the square root of 61, I will get, I'm going to go round to the nearest tenth, I will get approximately 7.8. So now I know that this length is actually I would do 7.81. I'll round to the nearest hundredth. So I've got 7.81 and 8.06. So now what I need to do is add those two together, and I get a total length of 15.87. And miles. I look back at that word problem to see what my units were supposed to be. So again, we used the Pythagorean theorem to find the length of this hypotenuse, and then added those two together to find the total distance from the park to the mall when we go through that city center. And really, drawing that picture was very helpful. All right, here we've got another question. It says B is the midpoint of segment AC for the points A is at 2, 6, and C is at 8, 10. Find BC. So we want to find the length of BC. So B is the midpoint. Well, if we want to find the length of BC, we can either, and I'm just going to kind of hypothetically, let's draw. All right, so here is a coordinate plane. And I'm just going to kind of plot. Let's see, I'd say 2, 6 would be about right here. And then 8, 10, we're going to have, it's going to look something like that. So here would be A and B, and we're saying that that's C. And that B is the midpoint. Remember that if it's the midpoint, it cuts it in half. Well, what we could do is we could find that midpoint and then figure out the distance or the length between the two, B and C. Or we could find the length of AC, or the distance from A to C, and then divide that by 2 and get the length of BC, because B is in the middle. So we could use the distance formula. Remember that for the distance formula, we take the difference in the x's and square it, and we add that to the difference in the y values and square it, and then we take that square root. So let's find the length or the distance from A to C. All right, so my x values. So my x's are 2 and 8. So this is going to be 2 minus 8 squared plus my y values are 6 and 10. 6 minus 10 squared. All right, don't lose my square root symbol. Well, 2 minus 8 is negative 6 squared plus 6 minus 10, well, that's negative 4 squared. All right, and negative 6 squared, negative 6 times negative 6 is positive 36. And then negative 4 times negative 4 is going to give you a positive 16. So when I add those two together, see, 36 plus 16 is going to give me the square root of 52. So that would be the length of the entire segment AC. So if I wanted to cut that into 2, I would divide that by 2, correct? Well, I can actually find the decimal equivalent using my calculator, and that would be approximately 7.2 for the entire length. So in order to find the length from B to C, that would be half of that. So I would need to divide that by 2. And when I divide that by 2, I get approximately 3.6. So again, knowing what this midpoint word means, that it's in the middle, that it cuts this into two equal segments. So I could either figure out what that midpoint was and find the length between B and C using distance formula, or use a distance formula to find the length from A to C and then divide it by 2. Either way. All right, here's our next one. Find the coordinates of the midpoint of the segment whose endpoints are x is at 6, 4 and y is at 12, 18. Midpoint, remember that means we're in the middle. The definition of finding the midpoint, we want to add our x values, divide by 2, because you're finding what's in the middle, so you want to know what's halfway. And then to find the y value of that midpoint, we're going to add our y values and divide by 2. So let's put our values in. Our x values are 6 and 12. So 6 plus 12 divide by 2. Our y values are 4 and 18. So 4 plus 18 divide by 2. All right, so 6 plus 12 is 18. And 4 plus 18, well, that's 22. And when I divide both of those by 2, 18 divided by 2 is 9, 22 divided by 2 is 11. So that puts our midpoint at 9, 11. So the definition of, or the formula to find your midpoint, add your x values, divide by 2. Add your y values, divide by 2. That gives you the coordinates for the midpoint. All right, for finding the distance between points, 7, 3 is at P and R is at 210 to the nearest tenth. There's our distance formula that we used in one of the previous problems. So let's complete. We want to find the distance between P and R. So we're going to subtract our x values, and always in the same order, 7 minus 2 squared plus now our y values, 3 minus 10 squared. Oh, put that minus there. All right, and remember in the end, we're going to find our value to the nearest tenth. So bring down our square root symbol. 7 minus 2, well, that's 5. 3 minus 10, well, that's negative 7. So I know that 5 squared is 25, and negative 7 squared, negative 7 times negative 7 is a positive 49. And then when I add together the 25 and the 49, excuse me, I'm going to get, bring down our square root symbol, the square root of 74. Now I have to find that, it wants us to round to the nearest tenth, so let's find our square root. And I get, and I'll put the little squiggly equal sign, that means approximately 8 point, and this is kind of writing out a lot of my answer. Now if I need to write that to the nearest tenth, here's the tenths place. Notice that the digit to the right is less than 5, so I'm going to keep this. So my answer would be approximately 8.6 units. That would be the distance between P and R. All right, so here in this problem, it's asking us to find the perimeter of the polygon. Remember that the perimeter is the distance around an object, which would mean, let's use our highlighter, that we need to find this distance, which since it's a parallelogram should be the same as this distance. And then you need to find this distance, which should be the same as this one, because in a parallelogram, the opposite sides are congruent. So really, when I use the distance formula, I will only need to do it 2 times. I will find it here and then multiply that value by 2, and then I will do it here and multiply that value by 2. Now, in order to use that distance formula, we need these points. So this is at 3, 3. This one is at 4, negative 1. And here we're at negative 3, negative 1. and we're at negative 4, 3.